What's happening, YouTube? You already know this is Captain Negativity here, and we are going to talk about personal loot versus group loot. Where do I even begin? Well, let's begin with one thing. Let's begin with a disclaimer. Loot limitations, in the sense that you couldn't trade higher item level or stuff like that to other players. That has nothing to do with group loot or personal loot. Okay, these limitations are a completely separate system that was implanted into the loot. I think the system was bad from the get-go, but it doesn't matter. They are removing it, so that's a step in the right direction. However, do not confuse yourselves by saying it's like, well, group loot is better because now there are no loot limitations. Nah. There's absolutely no reason for there to be loot limitations to begin with. They could have removed that separately, regardless of its personal loot or group loot. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's start with personal loot. Now, what is personal loot? Basically, the boss has 12 items, okay, and the personal loot is distributed evenly amongst the group. Everyone has a 5% chance of getting loot automatically, and each loot basically has an 8.3% chance. In this example, we're just gonna keep it as simple as possible because that's not exactly how loot in WoW works. Capes have a higher chance of dropping than, let's say, weapons and trinkets, but we're going to assume that all the items have the same amount of chance of dropping. Okay, so with personal loot, everyone has a chance to drop to get an item, the same amount of chance. However, with personal loot, what you can do, and these are the positives of personal loot, you can stack armor to increase your chance of getting loot. You can stack specialization such as tank or healer to increase the chances of certain loot dropping. And the best part about personal loot was that all the items that will drop are going to be usable by the raid. Okay, or you can use them. All the players who get an item will, it's not a useless item unless like a lower item level, but like, you know what I mean, like it's going to be an item directed for you. Okay, in this example we're talking about the composition that has 6 plate wearers, 3 mail wearers, 5 leather slots, and 6 cloth slots. Okay, players that can choose a specialization, for example tank, there are 10 players like that. Physical DPS dealers, so this is mostly would be for trinket targeting. Physical DPS damage dealers, basically, we have 13 of them. Magic damage dealers, we have 9 of them. And healers, we have 8 people who can spec into a healer, or like basically choose the loot for a healer. So you can easily increase your chances of getting certain items with personal loot. Okay, those are the benefits. The negative part of personal loot is basically there's loot competition. However, it is compensated because even though the competition increases with the more, let's say, same armor type as you are in the raid, it is also increasing the chance that said armor type will drop, right? So it is a positive and a negative at the same time. Okay, let's talk about group loot for a second. Group loot, everything is the same in terms of like what example we're using, the same composition. Okay, you still have the 6 plates, the 3 mail, etc, etc. Now, the boss still has 12 items to drop. The boss can only drop 3 items. This is how it was in Shadowlands. And the boss still has a 36 item loot table, in the sense that each item can drop multiple times. So essentially, the same item can drop 3 times in a row. Each player here has a 5% chance as well to get loot. However, each item this time has only an 8.3% chance of dropping, unlike the previous one where the 8.3 chance would be the base chance, but it is multiplied by the amount of players who can actually use the loot. In group loot, that is not the case. Even if you don't have a hunter bow can still drop. Right, so for example, if you take a run of, let's say, 20 plate wearers, and you're like, oh, you're gonna take 20 plate wearers, warrior tanks, paladin tank, paladin healers, red paladins, and warriors and death knights. Okay, there you go, a full 20-man plate wearing group. you can bet your ass that only items that are specifically for whatever loot specialization they choose and whatever armor they're using, that is the only loot that would drop. That is not the case with group loot. If you bring 20 plate wares with group loot on, you are not more likely to get more gear for your characters. You might get bows drop, you might get cloth, mail, leather drops, etc. In my opinion, that is not a good system. I feel like if people want to play in a degenerate game style and increase their chances of getting certain loot, by all means, go for it. No one really does it except for like world firsters. So all this is doing is affecting the world firsters and screwing up the other players. Right? That's how it is. Anyways, what are the positives of group loot? Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking about this for like 10 minutes, and the only positive for group loot that I found is that it has visual satisfaction. That's all it is. Right? There it is. Visual satisfaction of loot being picked up from boss and rolling for it instead of automatic rolling in the background. That is literally the only positive I found with group loot. There's absolutely no other positive compared to like personal loot. Okay, the negative is again the loot competition amongst same main specializations or armor types. But here's the thing: unlike personal loot, where it also increases the chance of the loot dropping, here it doesn't even increase the chance. It just keeps lowering it, because now you only have an 8.3% chance of something dropping, and then you need to roll it against at least 6 players if you're plateware, at least 6 other players that can use that item. Grid competition, maybe this me being nitpicky, but technically it is a negative. If let's say you're trying to get more enchanting gear for some reason, you have less chance of winning greed rolls. It is what it is. I mean, this doesn't really matter too much. Like it's the same as personal loot. But yeah, and the chance to drop loot that no one can use is the biggest one. If you don't have a certain class in your in your run that can use a certain bow, this is mostly hunters and their bows. Well, tough titty, you just lost an item out of the 3 items that are possible to drop. And imagine 2 bows drop and no hunters are there, and then the bow that is extra super exotic rare difficulty chance of dropping never drops again for these hunters who missed the raid night that one time. I feel like that is punishing both the raid team and the hunters for absolutely no reason. And again, these examples can go on forever, but you get my point. Having the possibility of dropping loot that no one can use is just too punishing for players. We are taking way too many steps backwards here instead of moving forward with loot. Like, it just makes no sense. But anyways, let's move on. So here we're gonna have a few examples. Same example. One is for loot, and 2 for personal loot, 2 for group loot. In the first example, okay, a plate chest piece drops. All plate wares roll need on this item. If you remember, in our example, we had 6 plate wares. So the chance of the piece dropping is 49.8% because all of them in personal loot increase the chance of the piece dropping. However, the chance for 1 player of getting it is 8.3 because there's 6 players who would need it. Okay, group loot example. Same exact thing, plate chest piece drops, all plate wares roll need on this item, chance of the piece dropping is 8.3%, chance for one of the players getting it is 8.3 divided by 6, because remember, you cannot increase the chance of an item dropping anymore, you can only decrease it by the amount of players that are there. So at this point, bringing more warriors or bring more plate wares is actually more detrimental for you to get your loot. Go figure. Personal loot example number 2. Play chest piece drops. Only 2 players need on this item. Chance of the piece dropping is still 49.8%. And the chance for one of the players getting it is 24.9%. So what happens in personal loot is, let's say an item drops. You have 6 plate wares. It goes to one random guy. He's like, yo, guys, I don't need it. Who needs it? 2 players like, me. And he's like, okay, roll for it. These 2 roll. So they have a 50-50 chance of winning. So you take 49.8% chance of the loot dropping and then divide it by 2 because that is their chance of winning it. They basically get approximately 25% chance of winning that item. Now, the same example in a group loot scenario. The chance of the piece dropping is still 8.3%, only 2 players needed, so now you're gonna have 8.3 divided by 2, which is 4.15% chance of you actually winning the item. Okay, so don't forget, chance of the item actually dropping from the boss is already low. Chance that you're the only one who needs it is gonna be low, unless like you are specifically the only plate wearer, which is impossible. There's only 4 armor categories, and plate is one of the highest. Like, there's a lot of plate wearers out there. Okay, warrior is usually in a good spot. I know what to tell you. And you're always gonna need a holy paladin as well. So you're always gonna have a good chunk of plate wearers, as well as obviously death knights. Don't forget. So you're always going to be in a competition with a lot of other people. Either way, in this example, your chance to get it is 4.50%. I don't know, man. You guys tell me which one sounds more favorable. Alright, guys, so that's pretty much it for the video. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. In my opinion, personal loot is the better option overall. No doubt about it. It is a slightly better system. And I'm saying slightly because these percentages, first of all, are not that accurate. They're accurate if all the loot had the same chance to drop, but it doesn't. Okay, some loot naturally has a 1% chance to drop. Weapons, trinkets have a lower chance to drop than capes. Capes by default probably have like 20% chance to drop compared to other things. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of how much more chances you would have with personal loot to get the loot you want than you do with group loot. But the thing is, you're also cucking other people. Overall, though, in guild environment, personal loot and group loot, they don't really matter to an extent. On average, it won't matter. You might get a bunch of like healing trinkets on your first few clears, which would be really, really, really bad because you don't want healing, you want damage for the most part. It's like to cheese mechanics in WoW, so usually that's not a good thing, but you can't really do much about it. That's just like RNG in the game, right? The only big thing that sucks for guilds, in my opinion, between personal and group loot, is that loot that cannot be used can be dropped, which then can force you to bring a certain, like, it's like, oh, but it can encourage people to bring all roles. Well, listen, if you have no one in your guild that wants to play a shaman, okay, or a hunter, which by the way never happens, but hunter's pretty popular, but it's like, first of all, you either force people to play something they don't want to play, or everyone suffers when the loot doesn't drop. And honestly, even if you do have the hunter and he takes the day off, for example, he has some family emergency and he can't come to raid, and you're just like, let's just do a re-clear, right? You do your re-clear and the bow drops. The hunter's not there. He feels like shit because it's extra uber rare. And the guild feels like shit because, hey, well, no one can fucking use this shit, so we just lost an item out of the items we were supposed to get. This is a no-win situation by any means. Okay, so that's another big detrimental thing for group loot. As far as bugs go and solo play, I would go personal loot the whole, most of the time. Especially if I make the raid group, I would make raid group with more plate wearers, because then I increase my chances of getting loot to drop. With group loot, I would just have to invite whoever is a higher item level, which would suck for me. Is it better for the game? Honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe it is. It could be. I don't think so. I think people should have the options. And speaking of people having the options, to just make personal loot, group loot, and master loot available. Why would Blizzard just keep changing which loot they want? It's like we had 3 expansions or 2 expansions of personal loot. Now we're gonna have 2 or 3 more expansions of group loot. There are problems with every loot system. There are problems with master loot because ninjas. The problem with group loot because shit you don't need can drop. There's a problem with personal loot because armor stacking is a problem, I guess, for like no one. For Blizzard, apparently. Dude, just give players the option. It's an RPG. Remember meaningful choices? This is one of them. Anyways. What can I say, man? Blizzard and their decisions, am I right? Anyways, Like, comment, subscribe. Obviously, tell me if you think I'm right. If you think I'm wrong, what do you think about group loot? What do you think about personal loot? What do you think about master loot? And why is it not even available? Comment, ask questions, and if you disagree with me, please write a descriptive reason why you're disagreeing with me, because I actually love reading those. If you agree with me, you're welcome. I just justified your reason for living, and you can also have a better sleep at night. And if you think master loot this should be in the game, just leave a like. Anyways, thank you for watching. That's the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.